it's a conflation of I would rather people be as communicate only data. I think that's what I think is really being meant here. It's like I don't have time for frivolity and I don't have time for small talk. Treat me like a computer, input the data, I'll output the response code, and that will be the extent of the conversation. And yeah, to your point, there's a corollary with very low IQ people, because just to kind of bring it back to our, where we started talking about the black and white problem, I've heard many where I work, I interact a lot with, I guess, urban types, to put it politically correct, and they'll say the same thing. Well, I'm just being real. And really what they're saying is I actually don't have the impulse control or the foresight or the empathy to think about how the words coming out of my mouth will affect the person on the other end of it. I feel entitled to just say directly what I'm thinking without considering repercussions, or I'm physiologically incapable of doing otherwise.
Well, it's interesting you make that connection, because I made the same one on one of the shows where I said, you're arguing like someone from the inner city. You keep repeating phrases as if the mere repetition of these phrases is going to somehow win the argument. It's like NAP, non-aggression principle. Yeah, you keep saying it's like a magic incantation or something.
Yeah, it's so self-evidently true. Why aren't you accepting it? If I say it 17 more times, then it'll get through to you. But it's very frustrating. Trump has done massive outreach to the black and even Hispanic community, whether it's by talking about the increasing job rates for minorities, Turning Point USA, this Charlie Kirk thing with Candace Owens. They have this hashtag Blexit movement. My question to you is there genuine bringing of African Americans, these disenfranchised minorities, into the liberty-minded, individualist, free market philosophy, or is this just a hoax too?
No, there isn't. Tim Scott, senator from Carolina. Yeah, what a great right-winger he turned out to be. That congressman, I'm trying to remember his name, Wade Holm or something, black Republican in Texas, speaking out against the wall, property rights and all that. They're all busts. There is a communitarian mindset amongst black people that this idea, no, look, you get handouts, then we can give you a job. Well, what kind of job are you talking about? You're going to talking about one of those jobs where you get to wear nice clothing and sit behind a desk and you get paid $250,000 a year? You want to give me one of those jobs? It's quite a sensible attitude. If I get stuff for free, why should I work and, get as much money or maybe even less money that I'm getting right now? This conservative obsession, conservative paycheck conservatism, cruise ship conservatisms, any day now, the black people are going to come round. I've been hearing that ever since Jack Kemp, in the 1970s. It's not happened. It's never going to happen. Now, Donald Trump is a big man, and black men like big men. Trump appeals to black men for several reasons, not least of which he genuinely seems to like black people. White politicians they're allies and all that. They don't seem very comfortable with black people, especially black men. Trump seems to like them. I could see him doubling, say, the amount of support he gets for black men. Black women are the most stridently leftist people in the United States of America, even more so than Jews. And no, Trump is not going to make any headway with black women who are, like 55% of the black population, something like that. Well, you look at voters, so many black men are, killed on the streets or in prison, that the, black women outnumber significantly in terms of votership, black men. But no, he might make some impact there, in the same way with Hispanics. But if you look at the figures for blacks supporting the Democrats in presidential elections, between 90 to 95%. It's been this way for, 50 years or more? These are the kind of numbers you associate with fake elections. Like old Albanian communist elections. You don't get that kind of polarization unless you're talking about a group which is profoundly alienated from the majority. Because you would think, sometimes I think, shouldn't the Republicans get higher percentage just by people voting for, by mistake for the Republican Party? Because, some of these ballots are pretty complicated.
Let's just give the Charlie Kirks of the world a little bit of ground here. I don't see any reason to believe that the Republican Party, the Conservative Party, could hold that audience, because Trump is an anomaly. He's a New York liberal who has some, I guess, traditionalist sensibilities, even though he's not really acted that out in his personal life, not to do the character assassination thing. But who comes next after Donald Trump?
I don't know, in 2024, it could be Tucker Carlson. I mean, Trump showed that anyone could be elected president. I mean, Trump had high name recognition, that's true, but Tucker Carlson has high name recognition as well.
We should only be so lucky that it's a Tucker Carlson type. I can't imagine that someone who is as intelligent and as thoughtful as him. And look, I liked Trump when I voted for him. I'm very much I've left the train, so to speak. But a guy like Tucker Carlson, he's smarter than Trump. I think he's probably more thoughtful than Trump. He has a longer political history than Trump, and he's you saw it with his debate with Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk, who to me represent more of the establishment conservative Inc. in the sense that they're for capitalism, regardless of what it does to communities, mental health, relationships. They're for the free market for the same reasons. They're goofballs.
No, Charlie Kirk's a hustler. How old is this guy?
I think he might be younger than me, 26, 27 maybe.
Yeah, and the right is constantly being taken in by these people. And, well, especially now by the women, by the conservative thoughts. Ooh, Cassie Dillon. She's 23 years old, and she loves Israel. She mentioned in the last, 30 seconds how much she loves Israel. No, I wrote on Twitter a week ago, if the Republican Party pivoted to end invade the world, invite the world, curbing the excesses of capitalism and descaling America, it could rule for generations, but one shouldn't expect too much from the stupid party. Charlie Kirk doesn't seem to understand that capitalism, particularly what Edward Luttwak called turbo capitalism, is not very popular these days. This, the majesty of the free market is going to free us all. Free to do what? To collect welfare benefits? I mean, this is one of the points of Oren Cass's book on the American worker, which we talked about on Luke Ford's stream on Friday. That efficiency demands that a large swath of American workers have to be put out of work. But don't worry, we'll give them welfare benefits. And, if they decide to kill themselves with methamphetamine or fentanyl, well, they should have been born with, richer parents, or they should have been born with 20 more IQ points.
Why didn't they have the luxury of being a trust fund kid? It's a really, look, the Occupy Wall Street philosophy, even though the movement kind of fizzled politically, has taken over the country, at least for people in my generation. Even if people are not aware of the history or the statistical facts or anything, they have a gut instinct that the system doesn't work. Not only does it not work, it's rigged against people to destroy moral integrity, absolutely everything. These are bad people.
The conservative movement was, from its beginnings, suspicious of and even hostile to capitalism. Capitalism was associated with the left and with the so-called Manchester liberals. I gotta, tell younger people that this reflexive worship of the so-called free market by the so-called conservatives is a relatively new development. I could also point out that many of these people claim to be Christians, And, a man can't serve two masters. That you can worship Christ or you can worship Mammon. You can't do both.
First off, I'll just say to this point of free markets, they don't exist. And maybe you could correct me. Certainly in the last 100 years, they haven't existed. What government is not, is the banking and the market not centrally controlled? I don't think that's ever existed. So when leftists say real communism hasn't been tried, or real capitalism, real free markets haven't ever been tried. This whole Donald Trump said during the State of the Union, we will not have socialism. Okay, socialism is the greatest evil on the face of the planet. But I don't understand how what happens with the military isn't considered, moving money around through the government, or what's happening with any of the pet right-wing projects, how these are not considered to be essentially socialist programs in the sense that the government is redistributing wealth in the ways that it sees fit. So I don't know what I thought on that.
Oh yeah, I think Trump likes to have fun, and he's a disruptor, as the kids like to say. That this talk about socialism in the State of the Union address, this is red meat to the boomercons. They love this stuff. But also in the Democratic Party, there's still a fair number of people there who are terrified by this word socialism. Now, I always have to laugh, a true capital has never been tried. Robert Conquest, the great Sovietologist, addressed this subject in one of his essays, where, he would hear that, true socialism has never been tried, that true communism has never been tried, that communism in the Soviet Union, say, is not true communism. And Conquest's response was, on the contrary, this is communism as constructed by experts. And when I hear people say that Alan Greenspan's Capitalism 2.0, ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, paying off the bankers for their bad decisions, et cetera, that this isn't true capitalism, my response would be to paraphrase Conquest and say, on the contrary, this is capitalism as constructed by experts.
So you mentioned Kat Timpf, Charlie Kirk, and then Ben Shapiro. There seems to be, this is not unique to conservatism, but conservatives, right-wingers will say, oh my gosh, the liberals, progressives, they're so for abortion. They're so for sacrificing the young. But and I would agree with that to a certain degree, but to a certain extent. But you look at these youthful conservathoughts, as you said before, or these brain-dead Charlie Kirk types or Kyle Rowland types. I don't see how the right isn't also. I don't see how they're not also in this cult of sacrificing the young to their political philosophy. Like there's a Moloch culture in the right wing in America, and maybe in Canada, maybe you can speak to that, as much as there is a Moloch culture in the left wing.
Well, the conservatives are all about, and the conservatives, I mean, the bad people I've been talking about. This is why we shouldn't use this word conservatives. Their highest value is choice. They use this word choice constantly. And choice now occupies the position that virtue did in the ancient world, that women should have choice. And what they mean by that is not, they're referring to work. That if, 100% of women decide to work outside the home, well, that's great, because that's their, that's their free choice. Well, who raises the children then? Oren Cass last week had some amusement talking about daycare. What do we know about the consequences of daycare? Well, daycare is a long history in communist countries, so we know a lot about daycare, right? And the news isn't good. It was, look at someone like Ben Shapiro, so many of these other people.
Ben Shapiro famously said, I don't give a good damn about the browning of America, but I would bet every earthly material possession I have that he would care about the browning of Israel.
Well, sure, but he doesn't seem to know that these people from Mexico and Central America, they don't like Jews very much.
Not even a little bit.